From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
This comes from S. That pause is intentional. It is ... S. That's for the gravitas, right? And so they got me. But here we go. Here's what S wrote to us to say. Hey, you all. Fun fact, I have a very difficult time pronouncing the contraction you all. It's embarrassing. I've tried. A lot of people assume everyone in the South can say it. I cannot. So, hey, you all.
Could you try? Can you try it?
It's
I just want to hear. It's
It's
really embarrassing?
Off air. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
All right.
You can ask our good friend Lauren Vogelbaum if you need confirmation. Noel has probably seen me try to pronounce it too. So I am a North American white girl who recently had the benefit of being educated on some shit going on in Africa by my colleagues from Zimbabwe and Nairobi, specifically China. Apparently, Chinese corporations have been supplying grants to African governments to build infrastructure. This is confirmed by a couple of sources linked below. And this is what I love about emails, S. I love when people are able to send us those links, to send us those photographs of whatever you saw, whether it's a strange thing in the sky, a creepy government installation. That, I think, is one of the primary advantages of email. So we've got these links, and S says, now here's where it gets crazy. The Diplomat article that she sent suggests this is not just global capitalism in Africa, but it's a power grab. China is using these grants to lean on African countries for those sweet, sweet UN votes. But here's where it gets crazier. My colleagues tell me these grants are actually being funneled back to China as the infrastructure is built by Chinese corporations who don't even hire locals. They just import their own staff from Asia. And this extends after the project is done due to the maintenance contracts. You need a wall painted? No problem. They'll fly in a painter from China. Now, here's where it gets crazier. They tell me that this extends beyond the build site to the Chinese corporations, even bringing street vendors into the community to replace the local vendors. I wasn't able to verify this myself, so I'm punting it to you. What do you think? Conspiracy to basically turn African countries into Chinese satellite states wouldn't be the first time Africa has been in this position, by reducing the population to vassals and the governments to voting blocs, or just good old global capitalism. Sorry for the long email. Love the show. Feel free to read this on air. You can call me S. Well, S, just for the sake of dead air, I think we're going to hold on the pause now that we all know you're the S we're talking about. This segment is brought to you by the letter in the person S. We have talked about China in Africa in the past. We have a classic episode on this. I highly recommend checking it out. But this is going to become an increasingly important issue as the years while on, as long as people are still functioning under the current global power structure. But the problem with this, like so many issues reported in mainstream media, is that the view presented is often pretty simplistic. Anti-colonialism stance. People get that now. We can all agree colonialism was bad. But there is a xenophobia that goes into this. There's a lot of like big bad China reporting, you know? And of course, the U.S. has and is doing terrible, terrible things, both domestically and abroad. So there is the argument to be made that there's a little bit of a glass house situation sometimes, but that doesn't mean that's what is happening on the African continent is not true. We have talked about the ways in which those infrastructure deals and loans can be used to boost the Chinese economy at the expense of a lot of just the regular people living in some of these countries and regions on an enormous and diverse continent. You know, it's not the sad truth of the matter is often in international deals, with authoritarian countries, at least, the people at the very top, at the tippy top, will make gangbusters amount of money, and the people at the bottom won't see too much of a change. Like, yeah, you're building a road, but what good is the road if it just goes from the port to the mine, right? And there's not a road paved to like the place where the people live. This is a problem. This does accelerate racist attitudes on all sides, and serious and I would say valid concerns about inequality. But while that complicated, nuanced system is true, it's in place, and we'll talk about a bigger picture of this, something called One Belt, One Road, which you may have heard of if you study Chinese foreign policy and foreign infrastructure, etc. One question that really stood out to me that S has proposed here is the idea that this economic assistance could be used to influence conversation and policy in the United Nations. And after doing just a little bit of reading, because this is definitely One Belt, One Road and the UN is its own episode. And it's one of those episodes that will be, I think, of increasing value over the next decade. But one thing that really stood out is I'm persuaded that it's true now. I'm persuaded the conspiracy is real. There's a great Wall Street Journal article that came out in September of last year called How China is Taking Over International Organizations One Vote at a Time. Now, this is not the same thing, not quite the same thing as, say, Chinese officials going to Zimbabwe and saying, you need to vote this way on the Uyghur situation or something like that. It is a piece of that, but it's also noting that Beijing is exerting more control over the committees in the United Nations. So United Nations has, you've heard things like the Food and Culture Organization. They have things like the Industrial Development Organization, things like that. If you're a country and you're just a UN member, you end up being a member of those organizations, hopefully. The same way that senators and members of Congress get a lot of power from the committees that they join, right? That's why people want to be on the Intelligence Committee, because it gives you some heft, You want, and you want to be on the Budget Committee too, right?
Always be on the Budget Committee.
Always be on the budget. And this is to some who are more averse to China's international growth. This has been seen as something like a sneaky tactic, or something even phrased as, a new front in a new Cold War, which you could say is a little alarmist, but the tendencies are there. China has a pretty good catbird seat in the UN and some of this development, because it's the world's second largest economy, but it still often pays discounted funding rates because it is considered a developing nation. So like in 2018, as Wall Street Journal points out, and this article, by the way, is by three authors, Kate O'Keefe, Drew Hinshaw, and Yaroslav Trofimov. This
nice Russian accent.
Thanks, man. Maybe I can get into China from Russia. Problem for another day. But so in 2018, China contributed 1.3 billion US dollars equivalent to the UN, and the US the same year contributed 10 billion. It's hard to grasp the difference of billions, but just know that a billion is a lot of money. A billion is too much money for any one person, basically. And maybe I can't get into Amazon now, having said that to Jeff. But
sorry, pal, that 30-day trial's up.
The 30-day trial is up. I need my petition Prime service. So what do you guys think? First off, I've made my initial conclusion clear, and of course I'm always glad to go back and modify those opinions if new information emerges. But do you think it's possible that China may be making these deals with African countries and then later kind of voluntelling those countries how to vote in the UN?
I mean, I can totally see that position, right? Logically, those things follow. I have a hard time getting my mind out of the resource extraction argument for why, China's motivations behind their actions in Africa. Just from our previous conversation, Ben, about steel production, and I think it's manganese that is needed that's in certain parts of Africa, cobalt that they're extracting, and what's coltan? Is that the one for electronics? There's another C word that exists in a very specific part of Africa that China is just ripping out of the ground to use in electronics manufacturing.
Yeah, coltan. They use gold mining techniques, and there's also a big child slavery problem with it in like the DRC and so on.
Yes, but I remember that was one of the main reasons we had covered China and their activities in Africa. I'm just saying I'm having a difficult time ripping my mind out of that being their primary reasoning. But I can totally see, I mean, if you're making that kind of investment in a country, if there are actual benefits even to the upper echelon of the leaders of specific countries within Africa, then I can imagine them having that kind of sway. I mean, it doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be super complicated. It's just they're bringing in tons of money that a few key people are benefiting from. And then they could have that diplomatic movement, I think.
Yeah. And there's definitely resource extraction going on. The position of the Chinese government is that they're somewhat more altruistic, right? That they're trying to help people while also, making moves that are good for their own economy. I believe it was a guy named Brahma Chalani who first introduced the theory of a Chinese debt trap diplomacy, which is sort of company storing people into compliance. That has been, at least by a lot of people in the West, that has been considered debunked recently. And you can read some interesting articles about that on the ChinaAfricaProject.com, which, by the way, if you can tell from the headline, is a somewhat biased source. But there's also reporting from places like the BBC. There's an excellent article, a summation of this, or defense of this position by Dickens Aloe, who wrote an article called Why African Countries Back China on Human Rights. I recommend reading that. At this point, the issue here is really one of perspective. Yes, resource extraction is occurring. Yes, there is the high potential for forming voting blocs, and that's not something original to China, though, right? Other countries do that. The U.S. does that, and you can see it in controversial issues. Almost any time a UN vote comes up that goes for or against one country's interest, then they both scramble to see how many client states, let's be honest, they can force to vote on their side. So to me, that conspiracy is both plausible and real, and it is probably happening. The question is, to what degree is that happening? And then the question also becomes, what is the individual situation for each of those countries who are maybe voting with the Chinese stance in the UN? Are they doing it because they genuinely agree with some ideological point, or are they doing that because it is a condition, even if not explicitly written out, it's a condition of the deal they have?
Trying really hard not to be extra super massively cynical about all of this, Ben, and just like apply it to everybody and analyze how everyone's voting. Which master is pulling the puppet strings in this scenario? No,
here's the key, Matt. It's the puppet that's pulling the puppet strings. You don't ever even see the master. It's just another puppet.
I like that. Yeah,
I know.
Puppets on puppets?
It's puppets all the way down and all the way up.